Hello, my name is Professor Ian Williamson. I have the great privilege of serving as the Dean of the Paul Merage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine. Welcome to another episode of the Dean's Thought Leadership Series. Today we have with us Pamina Barco, who is an acclaimed healthcare leader. She is the founder and CEO of Orange County Pain Management. She is a classically trained chef as well as a clinical nutritionist. But perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about is she's also an alum of the Paul Merage School of Business. Pamina, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Pamina, I'd like to talk to you to get your thoughts on what has been, I'll use the word extraordinary, to think about the last 18 to 24 months. And certainly one of the things we've talked a lot about is how it's disrupted a lot of the things that we took for granted and perhaps has changed in many ways, many industries and sectors. But given your expertise in healthcare, I particularly like to get your thoughts as to how do you see the last 18 to 24 months impacting healthcare today, but perhaps even more interesting, going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question because in 2008, in 2009, during the financial crisis, healthcare was not impacted in the way most industries were. So I think we haven't had to go through a tremendous crash or rethinking of the industry until now. Obviously, COVID, we were at the epicenter of that, and it's changed the way we see the world. I think going forward, we've taken some lessons. One is mergers and acquisitions. During COVID, mergers and acquisitions in our industry were up 43% last year alone, and an additional 20% this year on top of last year's numbers. We're seeing consolidation. We saw it before, but we've never seen it like today. I think we got scared during COVID. If we were a little guy, we were looking around thinking, oh my gosh, we're shut down. Are we going to be able to see patients? And if not, when are we going to be able to make money again as an institution? It was a very scary time. And of course, you know, it was a great time for large organizations to come knocking on our doors and saying, hey, would you like us to rescue you, to save you, or to just straight out buy you? Maybe you're doing okay, but think of the larger implications of this pandemic. So I think going forward, one of the things we're going to see in healthcare is more and more consolidation. I think something else we've learned too is workforce. We have to appreciate our workforce. Never before have we read so many articles about physician burnout, nurse burnout, even staff burnout. It's been an unusual time. It's been all hands on board, not enough people, not enough skilled workers in our industry. And we've asked a lot of them. Too much, really. It's a pandemic. We don't have all the information for it. And it was like, hey, go and keep working and let's push you harder. And there's more red tape. There's less resources. In fact, we don't even have masks for you, but we're asking you to put your life on the risk. And we've asked a lot of them. And I think now it's a time to sit back moving forward saying, what do we give to our workers? How do we treat them well? How do we make this an industry that people are still proud to be part of, that they're not going to get burned out in? How do we take this workforce that has just given their all in the last 18 months and thank them and create a really great work environment for them moving forward? And I think the third important thing that's come out of this is we're nervous in this industry. You know, we didn't have to get nervous during the financial crisis because, you know, everybody, even if they've lost their jobs, needs healthcare. And that was our thought is, oh, we are so recession proof. And then a pandemic like this comes along and it makes us very nervous. And we realize we don't have all the processes in place. We don't have all the resources in place. We don't know what we're doing. And I love that our industry is talking about, hey, for the next shutdown, or if a pandemic comes up again, what will that mean for us? And so it's made us a little nervous, and it's making us look out to other industries for lessons. You know, we're out there growing our skill sets in a way we've never done. Not like this. This has been a push for us to grow. So I think that there's a lot of lessons that if we do a good job, we can parlay these lessons moving forward saying, what does the future of healthcare look like? It's going to look like bigger conglomerates. Hopefully it's going to look like a really diverse workforce with more focus and emphasis on how do we make this workforce fantastic. And third, hopefully it makes us more nimble because we're nervous, and from that we can learn lessons from other industries, and we can look to innovation to really pave the way and be prepared next time around.
Quite a bit of change.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're also seeing right now, in addition to all the financial challenges and the pandemic, you're also seeing in society across the world an expectation that organizations play an active role in addressing broader social issues. These are things like social participation, discrimination, inequality. And I certainly think that's quite relevant in the space of healthcare. And I would love to get your perspectives on this issue around social issues at the intersection of healthcare and how that's playing out with things like the representation within the workforce and the way we provide healthcare. What are your thoughts on that?
I think one thing that the epidemic has pointed to, and there were some great stories actually this morning about how the epidemic has hit different financial sectors differently. I think we know now that if, those that had money during the pandemic were able to get health care and access to healthcare and drugs, that people that are disadvantaged didn't. So I think we can say a lot about the disparity in healthcare through an epidemic. We're not prepared to serve society at large, and we can do better. Truly, we can do better. So I think we're aware of that. Once again, so we have to be nimble. We have to plan ahead and say, hey, if everybody in the world needs this, or everybody at least in our region needs this, what does that look like? And how do we get this to them as quickly as possible? But I think the other question that you brought up is, near and dear to me because I'm in the industry and we work so hard, at least I do in my organizations, at the workforce. What does that workforce look like? I said earlier that this workforce has been taxed. We have put a lot of pressure on them, and that has been a workforce that's very diverse. I don't know if people know, but especially where we're sitting in Orange County, a large sector of the healthcare industry is diverse. We have a lot of Latinos, we have a lot of minorities, we have a lot of women that actively are in our workforce. But I think one near and dear passion of mine is pointing out the leadership in this industry. If we look at healthcare, it's still not as diverse up at the leadership levels like it is at the worker levels. And I think especially during a time, of uncertainty, during a time of change, we have to ask ourselves the question, is our leadership structure sufficient? Are our leaders the right leaders? The way we shape our leaders, the way we choose our leaders, the type of leaders we have, the organizational structure. This is a time for rethinking that because it's enough already. I think we saw some really clunky leadership through this, and in part is because there was a disconnect. This is a time when our workforce needed comfort, reassurance, even love to say, we're here for you. Do you need an extra laptop because you have to teach your child next to you while you're picking up phone calls for our patients? What can I provide you with? We need leaders that are accessible, that understand that workforce, and to some degree that are that workforce. And that requires a lot more diversity than we have today.
So you bring up this notion of leaders, and I'd love to get your thoughts on leadership as a behavior or as an act. And what has been some of the learnings you've taken about leadership during this period of time, and how would you think about that going forward in the leadership roles that you will have?
There's been so much. It's been such a humbling time, and I hope all the other leaders through the pandemic agree, because none of us are prepared. How can you possibly prepare? But for me, there were a few things that really I started to appreciate. One is I'm with a small organization and we're able to be nimble. And to have our core team come together, to have Gavin Newsom say, we have a shutdown and we're part of that shutdown because we're not an emergency room. We're private clinics and we're shut down one day. What does it mean for our business? And within 48 hours, we were up and running smoothly. And by up and running, I mean online in a way my industry had never done. So there is an aspect of nimbleness that has to happen with leadership. I think humbleness is another great one. We don't have the answers, and that means we have to learn new skill sets. We have to be open to that. And I think thirdly, there's the people component. No matter how much we hope that it's about finances and operations and all these other things, and it's true, it is, but at the end of the day, if we can't take care of our workforce, that's our job as leaders, is to be there to support them, is to be there to create the situation in which they can thrive despite what's happening in the outside world. That's what makes me thrive. I think that's what makes me excited to be a leader in today's era, is we do get to do more personalized leadership in many ways.
So maybe last question. You talked a lot about the importance of having a workforce that reflects the populations that we're serving.
Yeah.
And particularly at the senior levels. And I wonder if you could think about maybe a reason, if you're thinking about the people who might watch this, why they should be thinking about opportunities in leadership in healthcare, why that'd be important, and how best to prepare themselves for that. I think that'd be a great, just your thoughts on that.
I think it's inevitable. It's coming. Change has to happen because at some point, leadership has to reflect what's happening in the workforce. So this is the time to get ready as young leaders. This is the time to think ahead. I would encourage young leaders to not just look to healthcare, look to other industries. See what they've done. We don't have all the answers in our industry, and I think we're going to be looking to younger leaders to say, what do you bring to the table that we're unaware of because, we're dinosaurs. We've done it this way for a really long time. What's new and innovative, in terms of technology, in terms of accessibility, even in terms of reaching out to minorities and populations that may not speak our language, but are here and they're part of this thriving community. How do we tap into that? How do we reach? How do we create better access for everyone? And so I think it's time for leaders to think forward, not just today and be wrapped up with the pandemic, but think about what it's going to mean as, populations are growing, especially minorities, immigrants. We are the growing population in healthcare. And so we're going to need leaders that are dynamic. And I think for leaders to understand, that it's about people, not just numbers and operations, though I love those. But truly, it's about how to bring all of these different people together. Because running an organization today is about being able to put together, beautiful community and say, how do we all work together? How do we all lift our hands and bind together to help our community? So I think future leaders are going to have to understand the different dynamics of what does it mean to be American, but coming maybe from a different culture. And maybe that's socioeconomic, maybe that's literally another culture and being an immigrant. But what does it truly mean for all of us to bind together? Where's our commonality and where's our differences, and to be sensitive to that? I also think the leadership that's here currently, the best thing that they can do is mentor those of us that are up and coming, and to embrace us and say, hey, you may not look exactly like I do, but you have the skill set, clearly you're the next generation to take this over. And so let's make it a little bit more colorful. Let's train, let's succession plan correctly so that we're with the times and not against them.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Femina. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much for sharing your insight. And obviously, as an alum, we're just very proud of all the success you've had, and we look forward to the many great things you'll do going forward.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.